Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Jumping straight back into it, fight reviews this past Saturday, the 24th of February, from the Caribe Royale Orlando. I'm assuming that's a casino, maybe a hotel, in Orlando, Florida, on DAZN. Edgar Berlanga returns now that he's been with, I think this might be is this his third fight under Matchroom since he left Top Rank, right?
Second, Jason Quigley.
Is it second?
I think it's second.
Okay, second. I thought it was third, but I guess it's second. Berlanga remains undefeated at 22-0 with the 6th-round knockout over Padraig McCroy, who takes the first professional loss of his career. I think Berlanga, he had so much hype, especially under Top Rank and first round knockouts for like 16 fights in a row or what have you. But ever since then, he's been obviously showing the holes in his game. What'd you think about his performance now in his second matchup under the Matchroom and DAZN banner?
I mean, I wasn't overly impressed. The first round was what both men landed like 3 punches each or something like that. Not really too sure why. They keep wrapping him in cotton wool and giving him, essentially like all these kind of like easy fights. Do you think fighting Jason Quigley and then Padraig McCrory is a good warm up to then fight someone like a Canelo Alvarez? No, not at all. So I'm assuming that, either Eddie Hearn or someone at Matchroom have seen, it looks like he sells a lot of tickets, but maybe he's not as good as first expected. Because you could see that with Top Rank. Top Rank suddenly noticed, when they moved him up and he was fighting some better competition that, maybe is not as good as we think. And, sticking him in there with, 16 first-round knockouts. What did he learn in those 16 fights? Not a lot, because he was in there for, less than 3 minutes every time. So, I think he's probably overhyped. He always comes across like he likes to be a boxer. He likes to have that kind of lifestyle, but I don't think he really, lives the boxing lifestyle. He's not a Canelo Alvarez or someone like that who he fights and then he's, straight back in the gym. He's, he fights and he's straight in the nightclub with Fat Joe and all these other celebrities and, living that type of lifestyle. So, I'd be very surprised if someone like Edgar Berlanga ever became, a world champion, but, it may pay off, fighting, Jason Quigley, Padraig McCrory. He gets a huge, huge payday against Canelo. Win-win for him, really.
I don't want to dive into the Canelo sweepstakes and Berlanga's possible chances yet, because we're obviously going to touch on Canelo and the news that's been around him the last couple days or so. But in terms of his performance here, I mean, let me ask you this. You said they're wrapping him in cotton wool. I think we've known that for a while. Top Rank even tried that. It's also that, I mean, I would think if you kind of read between the lines, it's pretty easy to interpret that, he's not really ready for the next level. So they're trying to get his confidence up and get him to improve. That's technically how you develop fighters, right? Especially early in their career. Like each fight, 4 rounds, 6 rounds, 8 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds, it's development fights until you really get into those levels, It's just like anything, experience, and you pass the test and you go to the next one, and what have you. With Berlanga, obviously it's just taken a lot longer, and he's had, the fortunate luck to be under 2 of the biggest promotional banners. First off, in Top Rank, arguably the biggest, and then being on a huge platform like ESPN for so long. And now under with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. Is he ready? I don't want to, like I said, I'm trying not to go into the Canelo sweepstakes or the Canelo news yet, but don't you think as a promoter, you just put your promoter hat on right now or your manager hat on. You know, you see him after that fight this past Saturday. You're the manager or the promoter. Would you still try to keep him in fights? Assuming Canelo's off the table and, you know, put him on the side. Would you still keep him in fights like that with obviously lesser known names like this, like McCrory, to try to develop his confidence, his skill, and see what comes out of it? Would you as a promoter or manager of Berlanga still do that after witnessing this past Saturday's performance?
Yeah, I would keep wrapping him in cotton wool essentially and giving him these gimme-ish fights. But I'm just going off what I see from the outside. Like, if Berlanga is really like someone that's super dedicated in the gym, when he goes to a nightclub, he's just drinking water, you know, and he's literally just working on his craft constantly, then maybe, you know, I would give him those fights, you know, getting him in there, someone tall, someone small, someone, you know, skillful, someone heavy-handed, giving him all those different looks. But from just the outside looking in, and from like the way that he talks, the way that he kind of portrays himself, from, you know, the stuff that you see on Instagram, you know, that could all just be a persona. You know, I'm giving him both sides here. But from what, if that's true and that's the way that he acts, then yeah, I think that just keeping him wrapped up, giving him kind of like people that are maybe unbeaten, but kind of have a bit of a disguised resume, shall we say, then yeah, I would go for that big payday and, you know, just wait for someone like a Canelo Alvarez, because I think Patrick McCrory was the highest ranked person he'd ever fought. And I think Belanga's like 9th in the world on BoxRec. Patrick McCrory's at 26th. So do you think going from 26 to number one, or maybe even pound for pound number one in Canelo? No chance. Absolutely no chance. It would be the equivalent of when Canelo fought Avni Yildirim.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy.
I think it'd be that one-sided.
Right. Yeah, I don't think anybody I don't want to generalize, but I don't think any reasonable boxing fan who knows the sport would disagree with anything you said. But it's the payday, you know? Why did Ryan take the Davis fight? He said, you know, we're going to talk about this later, but, you know, just to kind of make some type of another analogy, you know, a lot of people speculate Ryan took the Davis fight because it was a lot of money. And they both made a lot of money. He knew it, but then he made subsequent excuses, like later on, even though after the fight he said no, like, oh no, I accepted this. I'll take it as a loss, no excuses. And then later on, as of recent as this week, in the press tour for him and Haney, he's making excuses and he was handicapped. And on the day of the fight, he was, you know, he wasn't himself, you know, whatever. It is what it is. But Berlanga, I mean, as long as he's drawing tickets, right? You know, it's going to get to the point where the fan base, you know, they're going to vote with their feet, and they're not buying ticket sales and not watching his fights. And that's when, you know, I mean, wasn't that the rumor that why he let him in Top Rank didn't come to an extension? Because, you know, they wanted him to step up and he didn't want to. You know, that was what was reported, at least. You know, we're not sure, but that's what we heard. You know, and so he goes to Matchroom and Matchroom's like, oh yeah, we got a new guy under the zone. Oh yeah, we'll put you in a couple fights that you should win. And let's see what we got here, you know. But he's fighting at what, 168? Let me see if I can think of an ideal opponent for him next, like in the next 6 months. I would say
like a gimme, like a test. What you thinking?
Well, yeah. I mean, like obviously the plan is to try to further the development and further your skill fight by fight, right? So, I mean, how I don't, I mean, who's ideally next in terms of skill after somebody like McCrory?
I mean, McCrory was an unknown. Like he had a high ranking just due to fighting like a lot of fights that were
like what if Berlanga fights Avni Yildirim?
I could understand it. He fought Canelo and
yeah, I mean, like
in
why
there
not?
And wipes him out.
Munguia fought Ryder, and then they're obviously that happens all the time with fights, big fights. Like, hey, they fought the same guy, and this guy took care of him quicker, or whatever. Why not put Berlanga in there with Avni Yildirim?
I could see him in there with, if you remember, Carlos Gongoria, who fought on a few matchroom shows, who was like IBO super middleweight champion, if I remember correctly.
Right.
He's fought like Lerone Richards, Christian Umbili. Only lost 2 fights, so I could see him in there with somebody like that. But I honestly think that they're gonna cash him out against probably Canelo, and if for some reason the Canelo fight doesn't materialize, Canelo go down a different path. I could see them maybe sticking him in there and kind of sacrificial lamb against Diego Pacheco, kind of banking on Pacheco eventually gets up to those world championship levels, and then with beating someone like, because it's still Mexico, Puerto Rico,
right?
You're still getting that audience, maybe not the Canelo audience, but you're going to get the Mexican fans,
right? You know what? I forgot about Pacheco, but you're right. Both under the Matchroom banner now. What if you put a Berlanga Pacheco fight as the co-main event of a Canelo fight on DAZN?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it'll happen, but
it's a showcase, right? Like, hey, this guy is the potential, for the main event. Next time around.
Why not?
You see it done. You see it done like on a regular basis. So why not? I'm sure you would want to fight on a Canelo card, right? And it gives you a taste of the big event, the big arena, the big crowd. Because these guys have headlined their own events, but they've never been in a Canelo fight.
What if what about Berlanga Shane Mosley Jr.?
I could see that Matchroom Golden Boy.
I mean, Mosley Jr. fight. Is it middleweight or super middleweight?
I think he's middle now. It's hard because there's not many super middleweights.
I honestly think even if Mosley Jr. is at middleweight, even if he is, I wouldn't even mind him going up to 168 if he's open to it to fight Berlanga. Why not? If I was Golden Boy, I'd be like, yeah, let's make that fight. And I think I would favor Mosley.
Yeah, Mosley is a little bit hit and miss, isn't he? I think it depends on the opponent, like he goes in there sometimes, and
I think that's an intriguing fight. Both go to 168.
Because if you look at the top 10, Canelo Alvarez, David Benavidez, Munguia, Derevchenko, Christian Umbili, Caleb Plant, Andrade, David Morrell, Berlanga himself, Vladimir Shishkin. I think he loses all of them.
What about an Andrade Berlanga fight?
I think he's all wrong for him. He's a mover.
Right. But I mean,
yeah,
in terms of trying to make a reasonable fight, I think Andrade beats him. I think you're right. He's all wrong for him, but like, I don't know, man. I'm on the Mosley Jr. fight here. Golden Boy versus Matchroom, both on DAZN. I think that's a pretty good fight to make. As long as Mosley Jr. is ready to, I think he is fighting at 160, but I think that's worth it for him to move up 8 pounds to 168 and take a fight against Berlanga. I think it's a high profile fight for somebody like Mosley. And if I was Golden Boy, I would say, yeah, let's do it. Because I think Mosley has a really decent shot at winning.
It's interesting. It's good. it's going to be interesting because how much did they pay him for those two essential gimmies?
No, right.
It's a business, you know. They're not just handing out checks for the sake of it, because surely they didn't make much money back.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure they've lost money on each of the first two fights they've had under contract. But you know, it's like you always lose money at the beginning, and you stick it out, and long term you keep trying to improve, and then you hope you hit that one fight that makes up for it.
It's gonna be interesting to see where they go. You know, like with that third fight of the contract.
Yeah,
it's gonna show you, I guess, how much faith they have in him, in a sense, right?
I mean, yeah, you know, I don't know where he's gonna go from here. You know, even though he did win the fight, you know, is he gonna go fight somebody in the top 20 now? If McCrory was in the top 30 or something, you know, maybe that's it. Okay, we go 5 to 10 spots down. You know, could be something like that. Moving on to the co-main event of this DAZN card, Shakram Gayasov remains undefeated at 15-0 with a technical decision in round 11 over Pablo Cesar Cano, who suffered an ankle injury after a clinch in the 11th round. What do you think about this fight?
Good. Good fight. I thought you could tell that they used to be sparring partners, because it was kind of like a little bit tentative at the start. Obviously, Gayasov and, you know, Pablo Cesar Cano, both with Joel Diaz previously. So you could see they kind of knew each other very well, and they were trying to kind of like figure each other out. Like, okay, like, is he going to do something different? They kind of knew what was coming next every time. It definitely wasn't the best performance that we've seen from Gayasov. And, you know, just unlucky for Pablo Cesar Cano, who was in a clinch, and then it looked like he stepped back and kind of maybe broke his ankle. Very unusual. But kind of give Gayasov, I guess, like a, you know, one bad performance because of the fact that he knew, you know, Cano so well, that it made him maybe like kind of hard to break him down and stuff like that, because they knew each other. But definitely, in my opinion, I think the worst performance we've seen from Gayasov, he didn't seem to be as agile and as fleet of foot that we normally see. Good body shot, though, in the third, and I thought that was going to be all that she wrote, but Cano managed to spit the gum shield out. I think he ended up wasting, I think they said 25 seconds, all in all. And then you could see Gayasov was trying to put money in the bank and just go to the body, but yeah, he didn't manage to finish him off, which shows the grit and determination that Cano had. But Cano, it's surprising, Danny, that, like, remember when he knocked out Jorge Linares in the first round?
But Cano was so much bigger than him.
But he never,
Linares moved up to 140 for that fight, remember?
He never built off it, which I just found amazing. You'd have thought, like...
Well, whose fault is that, though? Was that Golden Boy's fault?
It's a good question, isn't it? His manager, him, Golden Boy, like...
I think they just had they had so much stock and confidence and dedication and loyalty to somebody like Linares. They were like, oh, okay, we can work around this. We can just say, hey, yeah, it was just too much of a jump. Like, that loss doesn't count. You know, Cano was just too big. I'm going back down to 135. Because, you know, Linares was a star. But Cano, like, I don't know. Maybe after that point, he was just a high risk, low reward. You know, who knows? Maybe they tried to get him decent fights and they just couldn't get him. And I don't know if you saw, but Cano actually retired after this fight. His manager or advisor is actually Robert Diaz, formerly of Golden Boy, who was on a couple weeks ago.
Did you see who was in the corner?
Who was in the corner?
Holding Cano's Mexican flag?
Jesse Vargas.
Close. Chris Glover.
Oh, yeah? Oh, he's a Pro Box kid?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, Robert Diaz told... oh, man. I forgot. I apologize because I was going to give credit to somebody. But Robert Diaz came out and said that Cano has said he was going to retire because of this injury. So, as of right now, Cano at 35-9-1 has retired officially from boxing. I think he had, I don't even know how many years in the game, for sure over a decade. So he had a pretty long career. Hopefully he made some decent money. But yeah, I think going back to when he beat Linares, how you said that, how they didn't capitalize on it. Yeah, that's always going to be a question on what would happen. But like I said, maybe they tried. Maybe they tried to capitalize on it and get him certain opponents or anything like that. And it just, they couldn't come to terms. So Cano retires. Gaiasov gets the win, but kind of lackluster performance. So who really came out the winner in this fight? You know?
Yes. Bad, bad performance, but if I was him, I would turn around and, if possible, get yourself back out there as quick as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving on. Andy Cruz also remains undefeated. The Olympian from, is he Cuban? Or is he Cuban, right? The Cuban Olympian, who has been receiving comparisons from the likes of, not the likes of, but like in regards to Lomachenko, in terms of his skill, and they're trying to fast track him early in his professional career. He gets the unanimous decision win over 10 rounds against Brian Zamaripa, who takes the third loss of his career. This was for the IBF International Lightweight title. Cruz, I saw some clips, a quick overview of his performance. Cruz, he looks like a veteran, man. He's got it. And I can see why they're fast tracking him like they did Lomachenko. I say Cruz by his seventh fight, maybe sixth, but seventh fight, he's in a world title fight. What do you think? What do you think about the matchup, this performance, and obviously Andy Cruz going forward?
I mean, the matchup was, good enough, I guess. Cruz pretty much won like every single minute of every single round. And it just goes to show like how good that he is, that everyone's kind of disappointed that he didn't stop him. Zamaria had never been stopped.
But he still looked good, though.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it just shows the bar that we've kind of all set for him, that we're kind of like, oh, well, is Cruz really all that? He didn't manage to stop the guy. It just kind of shows the bar that we've set, that it's just that high. But, I thought it was a good performance. He looks, he's good to watch, like a veteran, like you said, in the ring, so calm, cool, collected. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just a moment of, it's just pouncing at the right moment to get a world title, because unfortunately, lightweight is they're all kind of held up at the minute. So it's, just when's he going to get it? And if you're a world champion, would you really want to fight Andy Cruz? Absolutely not.
Right. No, yeah. He's definitely going to be one of those high risk, low reward guys for a while. They're really going to have to like force him into mandatory spots and all that, and really play politics at the highest level to try to get him those fights. They really are going, because there's probably going to be fighters who will vacate a title just not to fight him. I can totally see that. It's possible that his first world title fight is for a vacant world title. That's probable. But let me ask you this. In the next 2 years, maybe less, out of any of the lightweights or anybody between 135 and 140, anybody with a marquee name, semi-marquee name, I guess, to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit, which one of those fighters comes to your mind between those weight classes would be the first fighter to step in the ring with somebody like Andy Cruz, the Cuban Olympian?
Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson, be?
You think so? I think Davis is the last one.
I mean, they're all about the money. If the money's right.
Well, yeah, the money, but like that's why I said he's high risk, low reward, and that's going to be like that for a while. He's going to be high risk, low reward for a while. So, but eventually he's going to get somebody. But who do you think, if you just had to speculate, who do you think it would be?
Just to get in there.
Stevenson? Because Stevenson, same thing. He's in the tough spot too.
Stevenson, maybe, because he seems to have a lot of self-belief. Davis, I think, he just goes where the most money is, right?
I'd probably pick Stevenson.
Yes, I would guess maybe someone like Stevenson, or
I think that'd be just based on Cruz, and if he keeps improving and stuff like that going forward, it might be a boring fight, but I think in terms of technical ability and boxing IQ, Stevenson versus Cruz, that'd be pretty intriguing.
It'd be a good fight. Clash of styles.
Right.
Be good.
So I mean, and the reason I said between 135 and 140, because, it's possible that Cruz in the next 2 years moves up to 140. So, I mean, it is what it is. But Cruz is, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, I think they got the. Is it too early to say the next Lomachenko or not yet?
I mean, everyone's already kind of saying it, right? It'd be interesting to see if he does have this type of career. Is it one of the hardest probably divisions, or one of the best divisions, I guess, in terms of like names and stuff like that. So it's just trying to get all these people to fight each other. Fingers crossed that we see that.
Right. Exactly. Moving on. Also, this past weekend from Tokyo, Japan, Junto Nakatani remains undefeated at 27-0 with the TKO in the sixth round, over Alexandro Santiago. This was for the WBC Bantamweight World Championship. Nakatani obviously made the move to the Bantamweight division and won a world title in a third weight class so far in his career in a dominating fashion. So he obviously was prepared for this fight. And got the third world title in a third championship in a third weight class. What do you think about Nakatani's performance?
A good performance. He's looking like a truly special fighter now. 27-0, 20 knockouts. Strong argument probably now for to be in the top 10 pound for pound rankings. Everyone was kind of going back and forth on Twitter on the weekend. Clearly one of the best, bantamweights, even though he's just arrived in that division. And it's just interesting now how, Japan seems to be having more and more of these, big fights, and we seem to be getting, more and more good Japanese fighters coming out of there. So,
I think Inoue has a lot to do with that. The last couple of years, he's really become a huge star over there, and probably got a lot of people more interested into boxing in Japan. So I think Inoue in the last, 5, 6, 7 years has probably been leading that charge over there in terms of really. I mean, they've always been, they've always had a good business for boxing out there in Japan, but just like they do with other sports like baseball, even professional wrestling and all that, like the Japanese people, they support. So it doesn't surprise me that Japan is producing a lot of skillful and dominant fighters over there. Obviously, being led by the monster. But I'm a fan of Nakatani, man. Who do you think he gets next, ideally, in the bantamweight division?
Well, somebody was on this very card. The next fight we're going to talk about. Takuma Inoue picked up the WBA bantamweight title.
Not that Inoue.
So could we see a little home fight, Japan versus Japan for the WBC and the WBA bantamweight world championships? It's
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I'll wake up at stupid o'clock in the morning to watch it.
Yeah, like you said, Takuma Inoue. I don't know if there's a relation or not to Naoya in a way, but I guess the 19th win of his career with a 9th round KO over Jerwin Ancajas. This was for the WBA Bantamweight World Championship. So like you just said, Inoue becomes the WBA Bantamweight World Champion. Junto Nakatani becomes the WBC bantamweight world champion. I think you're right. I think they knew what they were doing here. We see this a lot with a lot of promoters and a lot of broadcasters. They put fights together like this on the same card to kind of keep these guys on the same scheduled pathway. So what? In the next 4 or 5 months, do we see a unification between these guys? Nakatani against Inoue?
I mean, I don't see why not. Why not? Strike while the iron's hot. They both just had great victories. Let's just turn it around as soon as they can. Say 3-4 months, they get to, go rehab a little bit, start training camp, do a bit of press, and then boom, let's have it done by the summer.
Yeah, yeah, and these Japanese fighters, they you never really hear any bad press about them. Like they go out there and they'll take the fights. They'll fight each other. So, I wish it was easy logistics wise for American fans to go to Japan and all that stuff, watch these guys and follow along. But
they don't miss weight. You look at Luis Nery, went over there, fought 2 or 3 times, missed weight 2 or 3 times. Boom, banned him from the country.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. But they're letting him back in because they want to see Inoue knock him out. So let's see what happens. Inoue's, that's what they call him, the monster. And I'm putting a lot of stock into Inoue in that fight, but I think Nery's going to come to fight. So we will see. And then I was, for Inoue's win this past weekend, he stopped Ancajas with a brutal body shot. It was a very, very well-placed body shot that Ancajas just could not get up from. And it was over, obviously, as the referee waved it off. So, yeah, it's always good to see the body shots in boxing. Very, very ultimate definition of the sweet science. Moving on to fight previews this upcoming Saturday, the 2nd of March, from the Turning Stone Resort and Casino in Verona, New York on ESPN Plus. Luis Alberto Lopez, 29-2, goes up against Rhea Abe, 25-3-1 for the IBF Featherweight Championship. And then also in the co-main event, Otabek Kolomatov, I hope I said that right, 12-0, goes up against Raymond Ford, 14-0-1. This is for the vacant WBA Featherweight Championship of the world. So 2 world title fights this weekend in Turning Stone Resort and Casino. Native American Indian tribe casino, I'm assuming. So it's a little bit more friendlier for smaller profile fights like this. 2 world title fights. So, I mean, it is on the ESPN Plus app, so it's not on regular linear ESPN. So, if you're looking for that fight this weekend on the regular ESPN TV channel on your TV, it's not going to be on there. You're going to need ESPN Plus. So if you have the Plus, turn that bad boy on because you got 2 world title fights this weekend in New York. Moving on to news and notes. Oh, go ahead.
Another Japanese fighter, Rhea Abe.
Oh, is it? I was wondering what kind of name that was. That's a Japanese fighter?
Yeah, and people may recognize him. He was the man that retired a living legend, Kiko Martinez.
Wow.
He's
the guy?
April last year.
Man. You know what? This is going to be fight of the year. Card of the year. Two world championships, and now you just sold me with that. He retired the legendary Kiko Martinez. And Kiko Martinez had a legendary career. He beat a lot of guys that he wasn't the favorite to win. So, if you can retire a guy like that, there's a lot of stock behind you. Moving on to news and notes section of this week's episode of the Last Round podcast. David Benavidez will move up to lightweight, reportedly, for a potential fight in this upcoming June against the Nail, Alexander Gvozdyk. Benavidez did announce it on social media. And then the WBC president, Mauricio Suleiman, said the fight would be contested for the interim light heavyweight title, which would place the winner in position for a bout against the winner of the undisputed upcoming title fight between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol on June 1st. So, I think every time we've touched on Benavidez and all the Canelo fiasco and everything. What have I always said? people obviously want to see get to Canelo Benavidez. It's got mainstream attention, and I'm not on that band. It's not that I don't want to see it. I would want to see it, but in terms of competitiveness, I think a fight between Benavidez and Bivol is a lot more competitive than a Canelo Benavidez fight. So I'm for this, man. I'm for this. And I know people are going to be like, oh, come on, man. We want to see Canelo Benavidez. Obviously, you want to see Canelo Benavidez because Canelo's the cash cow. You always want to see the guy fight the highest profile guy, the moneymaker fight, the biggest threat next in line and stuff like that. I understand that. But I honestly think Canelo Alvarez is going to be less competitive against Benavidez than Bivol. Well, like Bivol and Benavidez is a lot closer in competition than Canelo and Benavidez. Am I wrong on that? I think I've asked you that before, but I want to ask you again. What do you think?
I mean, I think we'd all love to see the Benavidez, Canelo fight just because, Benavidez is taller, the fan base. I think Benavidez doesn't really back down, so he would probably still, even though it's Canelo, try to walk him down. I think in terms of, build up and the amount of, Hispanic, Mexican fans that would watch it would be unbelievable. I'd love to see the numbers that, that would do if it had a good build up and, was announced, 8 to 10 weeks before, even do, like a little press tour or something like that, because I think that would sell great numbers. In terms of just a fight itself, I think Govodnik is a good fight. Bivol would be a good fight. Bivol against Benavidez would be interesting just because of the fact of the class of the styles. Benavidez just trying to walk him down. Bivol probably boxing off the back foot. I mean, it
better be a beats Bivol. Better be against Benavidez. Like, I think either of those guys it might not be marquee in terms of moneymaker and high profile. Obviously, because Canelo Alvarez is a cash cow, but in terms of boxing competition, I fully believe Beterbiev or Bivol is a better matchup in terms of boxing competition against somebody like Benavidez. And that's saying a lot because Canelo Alvarez is obviously highly skilled. And I'm not saying it won't be competitive. I'm just saying that I believe, as a boxing fan, and as we cover the sport here on our podcast on a weekly basis and all that, I think Beterbiev or Bivol is a more competitive matchup against somebody like David Benavidez. I mean, I don't know. Am I speaking out of turn here? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I'm surprised with them going for the nail because I don't see that doing amazing business. But maybe they're just going for legacy due to the fact that the WBC are handing Benavidez again another WBC belt after he lost the super middleweight belt, was it, or the middleweight belt twice due to missing weight,
which is a very very important fact that people. Obviously this happens a lot when the biggest star is involved and people want to see certain fights. Happened with Mayweather, happened with De La Hoya, Chavez, all that stuff, Tyson. But Benavidez, I mean, there's a decent chance that he probably could have got a Canelo fight a couple years ago if he didn't lose his belts on his own, I mean, there's a chance. And he lost the fights. He lost his belts because of cocaine and then I think on the scales or something like that. He lost the belt. So that also has a lot to do with it. That has a lot to do with it in terms of, affecting the timeline and people say, oh, he deserves it and stuff like that. Look, Benavidez he just fought Andrade. He beat an undefeated Andrade. Before that, who did he fight before that?
Before he fought Andrade?
Yeah. Caleb Plant, correct. That's right. He beat Caleb Plant. He beat Andrade. I like those wins. I think Benavidez has shown that he's like, yeah, I'm facing the top competition. I give it to him. He's been showing it. And, he was trying to get the Canelo fight. And then obviously, as we're going to touch on in a second, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. At least maybe not anytime this year or at least in the next couple months. So he's doing literally the next best thing in terms of competition. maybe not money maker. He's still going to make decent money, but in terms of high profile, obviously not. He's moving up to the next division, which honestly is where he belongs. He's a big kid. And he's fighting the Nail, which Benavidez should win. I mean, hopefully it's an exciting fight, but it should win. And it's for essentially the interim light heavyweight championship for the WBC, who's the mandatory for the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev. I like that. I think Benavidez and his team, their last 2 fights, and now if you include this next one, 3 fights, I think they're doing exactly what they need to do with the obstacles that they're presented. They're like, okay, we don't get Canelo, or the Canelo fight isn't materializing. We're going to go this route. Ideally, you would think, oh, okay, Benavidez is like, okay, Canelo didn't stay with PBC to fight Charlo at 168. Okay, let's do Benavidez versus Charlo at 168. Why not do that? Obviously, Jermall Charlo was ready to fight. Why not put Jermall Charlo against Benavidez at 168? They both fight for Al Haymon and PBC. Why not? You talk about business. You talk about bigger business. A Benavidez versus Charlo fight at 168 is a lot more marketable, and they both make more money than David Benavidez versus the Nail. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the Nail. Like, I don't see that selling an awful.
I mean,
lot.
I think it's a decent fight, but in terms of business,
yeah.
Why not put Benavidez against Charlo? They're both Al Haymon guys. I mean that, and I'm fairly certain based on what we know about Benavidez would not turn down that fight. He'd be like, yeah, let's do it. So who's turning down that fight? Is it Charlo? Is it Haymon say no, I don't want to put that fight on? You know? So I think Benavidez is literally, it's like people always say, like, same thing happened with Bivol and stuff like that. They say, oh, he's been fighting these lesser known guys, like nobody's fighting him. So, what are you supposed to do? You try to fight the number 1 guy, the number 2 guy. Oh, they don't want to fight. We can't come to an agreement. Okay, I'll go to the number 3 guy. Number 3 guy doesn't want to fight. Can't come to an agreement. All right, I'll go to the number 4 guy. You essentially have to go what's next in line, right? I mean, what else are you supposed to do? There's has to be plan Bs, plan Cs, plan Ds, plan Es, etc. So I think Benavidez and his team, you got to give them a ton of credit for this. They're like, okay, well, let's move up to light heavyweight. We're fighting the Nail, which it's an intriguing matchup. And then we get an interim belt. And then hopefully we fight the winner of Bivol Beterbiev by the end of the year. I mean, could you really hate on that plan based on everything that's happening so far?
No.
I think he's doing exactly what he needs to do with the situations that are arising on a daily basis.
He's busy.
Yeah. And people want activity, right? And they want you to fight the best. Like, I think he's doing it. So, it is what it is. It is what it is. Like, he's figuring it out. He's like, okay, well, let's move up to light heavyweight. Boom. And if we get a Benavidez versus Beterbiev or Bivol by the end of the year, sign me up, man. Sign me up for that fight, for either of those fights. Like, I'd look forward to that easily. I'm all for it. Now, could it happen because, all 3 of them are technically with different promoters and broadcasters? Who knows? But, it is what it is. It is what it is. And then also the WBA World Heavyweight Champion, I guess, if you want to call that, Mahmoud Char's, his first title defense in 6 years will be a road matchup. Char, who was reinstated last August after a lengthy legal battle with the sanctioning body, the WBA, will meet former 2-time world title challenger Kubrat Pulev on March 30th in Bulgaria. What's your reaction to that?
Absolutely great. I mean, well, Charles has been around for how long? Just managed to hold on to that belt with, help from, Don King, constantly going to
6 years, man. 6 years.
That's just insane. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't just thrown a lot of money at him and, taken that WBA world heavyweight champion from him, just essentially bought it from him just so he can ride off into the sunset, into retirement.
Obviously, something worked out. He got another payday out of it.
Yeah. Good for him. Good for him.
Good for him. And then also, Gervonta Tank Davis reportedly rejects a fight with Conor Benn. Eddie Hearn had said in the media that the offer they made to Davis was for over the $10 million guaranteed purse, but it also had pay-per-view bonuses that would have been attached to that, and then also live gate bonuses that would have been attached to that as well. So obviously it could have risen from that guaranteed $10 million. Eddie Hearn didn't discuss it in further detail in the media, but I thought it was interesting, man, because like Davis did tweet towards Conor Benn, and then I think towards Eddie Hearn, and saying like he wanted to make the fight, and it seemed like he was open to traveling to the UK. And I think he said at one point he was like, I'm trying to do what's good for the sport and go over there, but and then I think Davis said that he rejected it because he was he was playing with him on money wise, like he didn't offer him what he was worth or what he deserved. So I mean, do you think Davis was ever serious about that fight with Conor Benn, or do you think it was just kind of to see what he can get and see if it could work out? And unless he got an exorbitant amount, which 10 million is obviously a lot of money, but unless he got an exorbitant amount, he wasn't going to take the fight.
It's an interesting one because, 10 million guarantee with the bonuses, like you stated, Eddie said, somewhere could have been eventually 20 to 25 million. And then the rumor is
in the UK, you think so?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would sell out. Davis is, big fighter. I'm sure it would have done well on the pay-per-view. I'm sure he would have sold out the arena wherever he went against a name like Conor Benn, because, how often does Davis go to the UK? I think he's, just been there one time. So I'm sure the fans would have come out just to see him. But then to turn that down, essentially, to then to supposedly fight Frank Martin, I just don't get him. He's not going to get nowhere near that. Absolutely nowhere near that. And especially with all the rumors about the PBC, just whoever's in his ear telling him, reject that. I mean, it's baffling.
Do you think that Davis Frank Martin fight will materialize in what actually happened, or do you think it? Because sometimes fights are kind of floated out to the media to say like, oh yeah, this is going to happen next. We're working on this, and then it's reported just to kind of gauge interest. I mean, obviously, that happens. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but do you think this is what's happening with Davis against Frank Martin? They're floating that idea out to the media. PBC is to see how it's gauged, and then if it's gauged good enough, if it's positive enough, then they'll follow through with it. Because if you think about it, Davis he's in a pretty tough spot. Obviously, he was on house arrest and all that stuff, but after the Ryan fight and how that fight performed, they obviously want to make him continue that trend, but you need a dance partner. And Ryan Garcia was that dance partner for him. So they're trying to figure out a way to not only get him good competition, but also an opponent who can contribute to the success of the event. And I thought when he talked about Conor Benn and then even potentially traveling to the UK for that fight, I thought, you know what? That's a pretty good decision. Go to the UK, you sell out over there, you do well over there, and you fight a huge UK star like Conor Benn. I thought that was a very good for his career and like how to get around like, the American pay-per-view side and stuff like that. They didn't have to worry that at least for the next fight. I thought that was a good idea from a business perspective. I thought I can understand that. Business wise, I can understand that. But obviously, it doesn't seem like it's happening, and he rejected it. And they're floating that Frank Martin fight out, which I think Frank Martin is a good fighter, and I think it's an intriguing matchup. But I think business wise, I think we all know it's not going to perform when you compare it to his previous fight from Ryan Garcia, right? Because I mean, look at, for example, Floyd Mayweather. After he fought De La Hoya, he got that pay-per-view rub. Then he retired for 18 months or 20 months or whatever it was. And then he came back, and then he fought the likes of Ricky Hatton, Juan Manuel Marquez. He throw in Miguel Cotto in there, throw in Shane Mosley. Mayweather was lucky enough that he was in an era where a lot of these fighters had loyal fan bases. So he had a plethora of solid dance partners to not only to be competitive and pose some type of a threat to him as the cash cow, but also bring financial contributions to the event. Obviously, Davis that's where he's at. Obviously he's successful, but when you have a huge event, like, for example, like I said, Mayweather had against De La Hoya, you want to try to keep capitalizing on that. You might not hit those numbers again for a while, if at any point again, but at least you're going to fight high-profile guys who are competitive against you or who pose some type of a threat, and it contributes to the success of the event. And I think Davis, especially because PBC and those guys don't like to share their toys, and it just doesn't work like that, I think they're trying to figure out what to do with that because, they want the event to succeed, especially now with the new partnership with Amazon. I mean, am I looking too deep into it, or what do you think?
No, I agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see. Davis is turning down that type of money. Who's he going to fight? Frank Martin, and then who? He's probably going to have to fight 2 or 3 times to make anywhere near the type of money that he would get fighting, Conor Benn. It's going to be interesting to see, what they do with PBC, because it looks like their platform's going to be a few pay-per-view events a year. It doesn't look like they've got like a monthly show or anything like that. So I see a lot of their stars and a lot of their prospects probably flying the nest because they're not going to get regular fights.
And then transitioning to obviously the biggest news of the last week or so in the boxing world, Canelo Alvarez and PBC have parted ways reportedly mutually after one fight of a reported 3-fight deal with Al Heyman and PBC. The only fight that Canelo did under the PBC banner was on Showtime last year, and it was against Jermell Charlo, Charlo just gave a lackluster performance. Canelo was on an easy cruise control victory. And obviously there's been reports the last couple of weeks about this, and some people, boxing Twitter just went wild, one side versus the other side. And then ESPN reported that Mike Coppinger of ESPN reported that PBC and Canelo have parted ways, mutually agreed to part ways. That maybe that it possibly had to do with the financials, that Canelo they couldn't guarantee the money. They couldn't agree on a pathway forward. I know there's other stuff in there that says like, they said that they offered Canelo his guarantee to fight Jermall Charlo in May under the PBC and Amazon banner, but he had to fight David Benavidez in September so they can make that money back. And reportedly, they said that Canelo, Dan Raphael actually think I said that, which, I don't know. Like I said before, the media floats to any field. The media floats, not the media, the promoters and the powers that be, they float information to people, And where I'm going with this is that Rick Glazer, whether people like it or not, this guy was right on this. He called it. Yeah, there was some details where he said like, "Oh, Canelo's going to announce he's going to leave PBC," and then he didn't technically announce it on the Mexican broadcast on Azteca Deportes. He announced that he just extended his agreement with the Mexican broadcaster, and that his fights would still be free in Mexico and all that. But Rick Glazer, whether people like him or not, he calls himself a boxing insider for 20, 30 years or something like that. He's been on our podcast before once or twice. He called this. He says he's not a reporter. He calls himself an insider who has connections to all these executives and high profile people in the sport of boxing. And not even in the sport of boxing. Obviously in TV, he has some type of connections. This guy called it. He said this was going to happen. And look at what happened. And then people, when ESPN reported it, that's when everybody's like, oh, wow, it actually happened. So, you also got to think about the last couple years or so, Glazer's been getting, information that journalists and reporters usually get. How many times have we seen, whether they're accurate or not, how many times Rick Glazer's thing has always been reporting pay-per-view numbers, right? And every time, read between the lines, when you see these reporters or these journalists or these writers, report these numbers from pay-per-view sales, like, sources say this event performed like this. Where are they getting those numbers at? Somebody is floating that number to them. Is somebody floating it to Glazer too? Seems like it, but he always has something to say, and he's the one who said he's like I think when he was, obviously he doesn't like PBC, Al Heyman, Showtime, Espinoza. He's not a fan, but every time he said something about the business or something about pay-per-view numbers, about Showtime or CBS or all that, he would always say, okay, if I'm wrong, tell Espinoza to tell me that. Sue me. He was like, tell me that I'm wrong. Sue me. Like he invited that. He invited that behavior and that criticism. And I mean, nobody's really, whether people try to dispute him or not or try to attack his credibility, the guy's been right, man. The guy's been right. And he called this Canelo thing. He said Canelo's gonna, it's not gonna work out with PBC. And look at it. Obviously Canelo hasn't really announced it, and neither has PBC. But I think with somebody like ESPN standards, I don't think they would have reported that if it wasn't accurate and it wasn't true. So, I mean, what's your take on this whole situation?
I think you hit the nail on the head, to be honest with you. Like Glazer has his detractors, shall we say.
He invites the criticism, though. You can tell he likes being in the thick of the storm online.
Like you said, I think he's got a track record of being right or in the ballpark pretty much, every time. And obviously, the PBC people obviously just don't seem to like him. But yeah, like you say, like Espinoza's never come on and given us proof, like, hey, the pay-per-view numbers are 1.5 million. Here's the proof or anything like that. So, if you had that and he was wrong, then why not prove it? And they never do. And Espinoza never talks directly to him. Essentially, he always talks about him, but never to him. And
just think about
his tweets.
Just think about the last several years, especially during the Mayweather era, all those reporters and stuff who reported pay-per-view numbers for Mayweather. And I'm not saying that Mayweather didn't perform well on pay-per-view during his time. I'm not saying that. I'm pretty sure he did. But, and even De La Hoya and all those guys, obviously it was a different time. There was a lot less content, lot less in-demand content, phones, computers, and all that. So TV was a big source of entertainment for people. So I'm assuming the numbers were a lot higher. But how much credibility and trust should we put in any of this information that we always hear? especially when it has to do with like pay-per-view numbers or anything like that, you know, from these like reporters or anything like that. You know, I mean, I think you have to be weary, right? You have to really kind of do a double take, like, oh, is this accurate or is this, you know, you also kind of have to look at the reporter, like, oh, okay, who are their alliances with? Who they like being close to? Because that affects it too.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
You've hit the nail on the head, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of the game. That's the nature of the game. So like, look at this is huge. That's big, and that's a huge blow to PBC, especially because they just signed on with Amazon and they haven't even had their first event yet. And you don't think from a business perspective when Al Heyman was negotiating with Amazon and their executives for whatever deal that they got, you don't think that he threw in Canelo there as a bargaining chip? Because technically he had Canelo for 3 fights. And what do you think Amazon is thinking right now? Like, what the hell? You know, like, and this also comes down to like, you know, there was obviously those reports that Showtime put up a lot of the money for PBC events, and also, you know, in terms of cover purses and, you know, stuff like that, and they helped for the Jermell Charlo fight last year, and now that they're out of business, out of the sports game as of December, you know, the trouble started. So, you know, obviously we don't have concrete details. We've had reports. Glazer said certain things, which obviously they're not, you know, we don't know if they're verified or not, but there's surrounding circumstances and signs that kind of point in that direction that, you know, Amazon's not really giving them any type of budget or a budget that's sufficient, and Canelo leaving them is pretty much indicative of that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you will probably see a lot more fighters. Like the talk is that Terence Crawford's looking for somewhere, and
Wilder went to DAZN this last time.
Wilder, Subriel Matias. You know, a lot of these guys are popping up.
Yeah, and then you're right. Terence Crawford is reportedly also a free agent now too, because the window for the rematch passed. So, yeah, I mean, what's going on there? And you don't think they? I mean, if you were Amazon, what would you think? You know, you negotiated with somebody like Al Heyman and PBC, and he used Canelo Alvarez as a bargaining chip. He's like, hey, I have him for 2 more fights. He'll be on Amazon. And I also have Terence Crawford and an Errol Spence rematch. That will be on Amazon too. And you just lost your 2 biggest bargaining chips. You know?
It's looking like it's just a platform for pay-per-views.
Right. I mean, that's what the idea, that's seemingly the idea that we're getting here. But I mean, it is what it is, you know, and people, you know, we're trying to dissect it here of like writing on the wall, whether this was Golden Boy, Top Rank, Matchroom, DAZN, ESPN, whatever, we would be dissecting it just like this. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a blow. This is a blow to PBC, you know, losing Crawford and Canelo. It's a blow, man. It's a huge blow to them, especially starting with a new broadcaster. I mean, what's going to happen? Are they going to be here by the end of the year? Are all these fighters under the PBC banner? Are they going to leave like some of these other fighters you just mentioned have went with other promoters or signed other agreements? I mean, Al Heyman, I think, is always going to be involved because of his role. He's not a promoter. He's a manager, advisor, or whatever. But, you know, what are you supposed to do? That's a big blow, man. That's a huge blow. And their first event is March 30th. Keith Thurman, who hasn't fought in over 2 years, against Tim Tszyu, who's not known to the American public. You know, and I like Tim Tszyu, and I think he beats the brakes off of Thurman because he's been active and he's a world champion and he's been fighting, and Thurman just, you know, he just hasn't been the same guy since like 8 years ago. So, and this is your first pay-per-view event? And then they're still trying to figure out Tank Davis, you know, situation, where to put him at, you know. It's probably, think about this, it's probably going to be Thurman, Zoo Thurman on March 30th, and the next event will be Davis against somebody on pay-per-view. You know? Who knows? We don't know how long this agreement with Amazon is. What if they say, "Hey, we're going to do 1 year with you, and if you perform, then we'll revisit and we'll extend if we feel necessary." That could be it. That could be it. I mean, you got to look at the track record. PBC and Al Heyman have been with how many broadcasters? PBC events have been on how many broadcasters in the United States? And each of them have parted ways with them. Literally, like every big broadcaster in the United States, they've almost been on. And it never worked out. So that's just facts, man. I mean, what are you supposed to think? That's a big blow, man. That's a big blow at PBC. It's huge. It's huge. And whether, people take sides of promoters and all this stuff, but like that's literally what's in front of us. That's what's in front of us right now. So I don't know, I'm sure they're trying to figure out what to do, but yeah, you had the biggest star in the world under 3 fights, and they want and then there's a thing that like, oh, Canelo's scared of Benavidez and stuff. I think that Canelo probably would have fought Benavidez in September, and I'm just speculating. You tell me what you think. But you got to look at it like a game, like a video game. Benavidez would be like the final boss, even though Canelo's technically the boss. Like, why would you fight Benavidez in the first or second fight of the deal, and then you still have one more deal with PBC? I mean, you would think, okay, you fight Charlo. I think that the goal was to fight Jermell Charlo. Well, he was supposed to fight Jamal, and then that didn't work out. So he fought the brother, and they're like, oh, okay, and then I'll fight his other brother, who's a natural 168, 160 pounder. And then you can market that like, oh, brother's revenge. And that's the second fight of a 3-fight deal. And then in September of 2024, you fight Benavidez. I mean, I'm pretty sure I don't think Canelo would have signed with PBC if he didn't think that was a tentative plan, right?
I think so. I think that's probably what the plan was, Charlo, and then obviously, Mexican Independence Day weekend in September. Then, hopefully he was going to fight, Benavidez. That would have done great numbers.
Right. So, I mean, it is what it is, man. And then now they're saying that, Canelo, Eddie Hearn has said that he's been talking to Canelo and they're trying to work something out. That Berlanga's in the mix, which I think is a horrible. If Canelo takes that fight, I'm not a fan. I am not a fan of that at all. Yeah. I didn't even want to see the Jamal Charlo fight, but like I worse want to see the Berlanga fight. That kid does not deserve it yet. Like not even close. So, and obviously there have been reports of Munguia in May, which I would like to see it. But Oscar De La Hoya said this week at the kickoff presser in New York for Haney Garcia that that Munguia Canelo isn't going to happen in May. And he even said when Munguia won this past January, De La Hoya said, he was like, oh yeah, in September, let's try to get Canelo. Because I think he said, oh, in September, that's an ideal timeline. It gives them time to build it up and market it. So who does Canelo fight in May? What do you think? I would like Munguia. You fight Munguia in May, and if you beat Munguia, you fight Benavidez in September. And if Benavidez is smart, he's going to go wherever Canelo tells him to go because Canelo is a cash cow. If he has to go to DAZN, Al Heyman needs to let him go to DAZN.
I think we see Munguia in May, Berlanga in September.
See, I don't even want to see Berlanga anytime soon. I don't.
a gimme. Like I said earlier, it's
No, yeah, but I don't.
about as much fun as the Avdi Yildirim fight.
Yeah, I don't want to see Berlanga at all.
There's
At
just
all.
something in the feeling, in the vibe that we don't see the Benavidez fight till later, or maybe even not at all for some reason.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I look at Canelo's, and I get it. If people want to see a fight, they have to bang the drum. But you know, each cash cow fighter in their era all did not fight at least one guy or more that people are going to say, "Oh, he ducked this guy." De La Hoya did it. Mayweather did it. It's all there. It's all there. Even Triple G. Look at Triple G was already world champion in like 2013 or 2014. Mayweather was fighting at 154. He was already at 154. I remember Tom Loeffler and Triple G's camp had said Triple G will go down to 154 to fight Floyd Mayweather. But he was a high risk, low reward fight. Did he duck Triple G at that time? No, I don't see it like that. Because Mayweather was the cash cow. And just like Canelo is right now, like there's always a guy who comes next. Like, oh yeah, if I don't fight this guy, I'm scared of him. First it was like Triple G, and then now it's Benavidez. Like when you're the cash cow, there's always going to be a guy there. Like, oh, he ducked this guy. Oh, and if he fights him and he beats him, like, oh, he was weight drained, or it was he cheated or something. There's always criticism when you're at the top. Mayweather got it. De La Hoya got it. Tyson got it. Chavez got it. And now Canelo Alvarez is getting it. So I think you're right. I think we might not even see that fight, especially if Benavidez moves up to 175. He's not coming back down to 168. And honestly, Benavidez belongs at 175. He's a big guy. He's a big guy. So, and I don't see Canelo. It's not that I don't see him taking that fight. I can see why he wouldn't take it. It's like, I'm going to get criticized anyways. His legacy is set. Benavidez is still working on his legacy. But Canelo, does he really need to prove anything else? Obviously, we want to see that fight, but how are you supposed to interpret it, What are you supposed to do? Munguia in May? Is that what you're going with then?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we'll see Munguia in May because Berlanga.
Unfortunately, really? I like that fight.
I mean, Munguia in May and then Berlanga in September.
Unfortunately, Berlanga, yes.
In a perfect world, we would see Munguia in May, Benavidez in September, and then after that, you'd be kind of hard stuck for where Canelo to go.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not a fan of Berlanga at all. Like to get a Canelo fight, no, not at all. Munguia, yes, I'm for it. Give it to me. Mexico versus Mexico, I'm all for it, man. But is De La Hoya, and there's also, let me ask you this: what do you think about Munguia? He obviously has a type of co-promotional deal with Zanfer and Golden Boy. Do you think, if you just had to guess, that Golden Boy has a clause in that co-promotional deal with Munguia because they are the more mainstream promotional company with the broadcast agreement? They're the big boy in the room. Do you think there's a clause in that contract that says they have to be a part of every fight that Munguia does? Because there's people saying like, oh, Munguia can technically do the fight himself with Canelo and not include Golden Boy. He can just include Zanfer. I'm pretty sure Golden Boy has a clause in that agreement, right?
They made him.
Exactly.
Essentially, all of his, I couldn't even tell you, all his last, God knows how many fights have all been with Golden Boy. So yeah, I'm pretty sure if Golden Boy have any good, well-educated legal team, I'm pretty sure they stuck something in there which said that you don't get to use our platform to create a big fight against Canelo, then ride off into the sunset without us getting a small percentage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that agreement says we have to approve every fight you do, and we're going to be a part of it. If we're not on board with that fight, you're in breach of contract. I guarantee you, if that language is not in those deals, somebody's messing up over there. So people who say like, oh, Munguia can technically do it on his own. He can exclude Golden Boy and not include Zamfer. I don't think so. And I don't think Munguia would do that to Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy. I think they have a pretty good relationship. We've been at a couple of his fights, especially here in the LA area, and they all seem like they have a pretty solid relationship and they all work well together. I don't think Munguia would do that even if he could. It all comes down to, is Canelo going to say like, oh, I don't want to work with Golden Boy and De La Hoya? And then Munguia is going to say what? Like, oh, okay, well, I wish I could help you with that, but I can't. I want to include Golden Boy, and it's also a part of my contract. So Canelo would have to bite the bullet and say, all right, fine, Golden Boy's involved. And it's right now in boxing, it's very, very interesting. There's a lot of news stories, especially with this Canelo-PBC deal falling apart. And now where is he going to go? Is he going to go back to the zone? What if Canelo goes to ESPN and Top Rank? He hasn't fought for Top Rank. Imagine Canelo Alvarez and Bob Arum together. You know what? Sign me up. Even if you I know I don't want to see Berlanga in a gimme fight, but the fan in me, I wouldn't mind seeing a gimme fight just so Canelo can have a fight under Top Rank and be with Bob Arum on a stage and fight on ESPN. Am I so wrong for that? Put him with the Bob father, man.
Yeah, I think he goes back to Eddie, but
no, yeah, I think so too. But you don't think Top Rank's trying to get into those sweepstakes? Like, oh, he's a free agent now. Let's make some contacts.
They can never keep any stars that reach that level.
No, yeah.
De La Hoya, Crawford.
No, right. But why not? It's worth a shot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. The next couple of weeks is going to be extremely interesting, especially the next 2 weeks, because I would think the next 2 weeks, a Canelo fight will be announced for May. So they can get like some kickoff press conferences in March scheduled. It's going to be interesting, man. It's definitely going to be interesting. But once again, guys, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Go ahead and rate us, follow us on Spotify, hit that follow button, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, comment on there. Just please help us with that because it helps our algorithm. It helps promote the show a lot more. It puts us up higher in rankings. And then it also gives us more credibility in getting the bigger guests in the sport of boxing. So if you just hit that follow button, if you listen on Spotify, that helps us in the rankings. If you rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, that helps us as well. Quick part of your day. It'll take 2 seconds. Just do it. It really help us out. But as we cross the finish line for this week's episode, Mike, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
At The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing the big fights from Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, huh? AJ Ngannou. Yeah, it's coming, man. It's coming. So once again, from my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.